Alright, today we're going to do a tutorial on tricks, which is a tutorial that's been requested for a while now, but it's kind of a harder tutorial to do because everybody does tricks a little bit differently, and it's even harder to teach them online as opposed to in person. So I haven't even been to the ocean in a few months, and today we're going to be using the Beast, which is a 5-foot long 1-inch skimboard. So it's definitely going to be challenging for me to do these tricks, and hopefully that'll replicate some of the struggles that people are having when they're trying to learn these tricks. One of the first tricks that everybody is going to do the minute that they can safely get on a skimboard, generally speaking, is they're going to try to do a shove it, which is a 180 spin with the board while you are sort of jumping above it. So today we're probably going to do a shove it, and then we're going to move into the idea of spinning 180 both on the water and in the air. We're going to mix those to make a big spin, and then last but not least we'll try to get a 360 shove it done by the end of the day. So starting with your shove it, there's a lot of people online who like to practice shove it's at home on the carpet or on the beach on the sand. This isn't something I recommend because it's not nearly enough a one-to-one reference of what it's like to do the trick on the water, and because of that, that means it can give you bad habits that you pick up and make it actually harder for you to do on the water. Better to just go on the water right away and learn how to safely start trying them and work from there on your commitment. So right away, once you've got your drop down and you're safely skimboarding, I'm gonna go over one of the first sort of safety tips you can do for trying to shove it while you're not committing enough yet without killing your ankles. So let's try some safety techniques for the shove it. So when you first go for the shove it, you're probably going to be scared to commit and spin the board something like 90 degrees, and you can try to hang your rear foot out to sort of catch you and put the rear foot on the sand, but try to keep your front foot on the board still while you're learning. So if you're nervous about spinning the board the full 180 degrees right away, you can try to just spin it 90 and intentionally hang your rear foot out behind the board and push the board a bit in front of you, only 90 degrees, so that you don't hurt your feet. And you can run with the board a little bit or just jump off. But I wouldn't get comfortable doing that all day, because that can give you bad habits too. That should just give you a feel for the flick of the shove it, which is that your rear foot pushes the board backwards to make it spin, and your front foot should be staying very still, but you just jump off the board with it once you're ready to spin. Now we're going to move towards committing to the whole 180 shove it, and we're going to take that same hanging the rear foot out theory and try to apply it to keep you safe when you are doing the 180 shove it, but you don't want to put both feet on the board yet. So you do want the front foot to stay right above the board where you need to land, a lot like when you're skateboarding. You at least want the front foot to be there, and the rear foot can be your safety, where you're going to land on the ground, and that'll help you run away from the board if you want to bail. So let's learn that theory. So as you spin the shove it, you try to keep your front foot above the board, but you can hang the rear leg out behind the board or sort of to the side to try to intentionally catch yourself. This technique is super common. It's just a natural instinct, you know, for a pro. If a pro is doing a 360 or a 540 shove it and they mess up, they're going to do the exact same thing. They're going to try to hang one of their legs out and try to get away from the board safely. So now let's go full commit. We're really gonna, instead of intentionally hanging legs out in any different way. We're gonna keep both feet above the board. So we're keeping both feet above the board. We're keeping our center of gravity. We're keeping our weight over the board. And we're gonna bend our knees a little to make it a little bit easier to land. You don't wanna be standing up real tall. It's harder to keep your balance and your weight shifting when you're doing that. Bend the knees a little bit, and that'll help you commit to being over the board. And it might prepare you a little bit better for if you do have to bail off the board because you mess up. It's better to have your knees bent, be ready to spring forward off the board. Let's do a couple more shove-its and then move on. The shove-its are really fun and they're a great way to learn. Obviously they're going to be your first way of learning how to pop tricks very high. You're going to bend your knees a lot more. You're going to scoop with your leg a lot harder, trying to move water to create lift. And that's how you're going to learn how to pop tricks. But that's a little bit later down the road. I'm just saying that's a good thing to learn later on. We're going to move on towards spinning so that we can put things together for a big spin. We're going to start with the very simple skimboarding, dragging the hand to spin on the water. Then we're going to do trying to spin on the water without dragging your hand. And then we're going to try to learn how to actually ollie the 180 into the air. So let's just do the simple hand drag technique first. I can't remember. Now we're going to attempt the water spin without dragging the hands. It's a bit of a weird body twist. It looks a little bit gymnastic in nature, and because of that it's pretty hard to explain, so really just focus on the visual. But I'm going to twist my upper body and sort of throw momentum into my body, which will eventually go to the feet. It's kind of like how if you're on a spinning office chair and you start wiggling around your torso, you're going to start spinning, and you can almost generate a continuous spin through that movement. So just watch the body language, and keep in mind this isn't necessarily a technique you're going to be using a ton in skimboarding. More of just a little fun thing, because really what we want to learn is the next step, which will be the ollie. So let's just try to learn this real quick and then move on. If any of you happen to be snowboarders, you'll notice a pretty similar preload technique to when you're going off the lip. I'm almost setting up the spin before I'm even jumping on the board, leaning my body in, and then once I'm on, I'm sort of twisting out and applying that spin to the board with my feet. It's not enough bath water to do it. And now we're gonna go for a proper 180, popping it into the air. So obviously technically you need to be learning an ollie before this. I'm not really gonna go over the ollie. It's a strange thing to do on the skimboard, although it is pretty similar to a skateboard. Instead of popping off the ground with the tail, you're actually digging into the water, and you're almost honestly creating a ramp out of the water that you dig out. And if you have enough speed, you basically launch off that ramp that you create in the water. So not necessarily going to go over the ollie, but we can kind of go over it at the same time as we learn to do a ollie 180. And let's try to get this spin down. Things will be a little bit harder for me on the Beast. When you have a normal board, it should be a lot more poppier. That thinner board should be a little bit more feedback. Of course, this thing does have a lot of float, which helps, but it's just so big and cumbersome. It's really hard to dig it in, and then even worse to try to be spinning it at the same time. But let's try to focus on the body language. It shouldn't be too different with the beast. You need to really get low and dig that pop in. And as you're digging that pop in, when you want to spin as well, you're doing that same preload technique. It's a little bit of preload with your body, turning your shoulders, your upper body, into the direction you want to turn. Okay, so we've gone over the shove it, we've gone over spinning with your hand, spinning without your hand, and then spinning with an ollie. And now we want to bring all those things together to try to create a big spin, which is a shove it, but you're also doing a 180 with the board. So the board is ultimately doing 360 degrees. Your body is just twisting around to do 180 degrees. But the beauty of the big spin when you're learning tricks is that, unlike a 360 shove it, you can learn the big spin in steps. I mean, you can almost start a spin with your hand if you want when you're beginning, and then in the middle of the spin just try to throw a quick shove it and then keep spinning around. If you do that, it's not a full big spin, but it's going to give you the idea. That slight discomfort of doing a shove it while your back is starting to turn to the water. A lot of the falls you're going to have when you're doing a big spin is you try to do the shove it, but you don't place your feet right, and you're falling like this. Your rail, front side rail, digs into the sand, and now you're falling backwards, which is never a way you want to fall. Ideally, if you're going to fall while you're trying this, try to lean a bit forwards and go forward and roll out of the fall, or just run out of it if you're going real slow. So a big spin can be very scary like that, where you're falling a bit backwards. So take it in these steps. I'm going to try to do a bunch of different examples where I'm not necessarily doing a full big spin. I'm doing one thing or the other. I do a shove it and then I twist my body a bit so it spins, or the opposite. I'll start spinning and try to throw a little shove it in the middle of it. So whichever way feels more comfortable for you, you can learn it that way, and then you can progress to that point where you're popping a bit more, and then the big spin is a complete rotation. The board goes all 360 while you're in the air, jumping off your board, and you're doing the 180 yourself. But let's learn these little cheater techniques of just slowly going into the big spin. Now that we've been flirting with the big spin a bit, it would be a good time to start trying to fully commit to them. As you could see on the last one, I dug the front side rail into the water as I did it, and you saw me start to fall backwards. Luckily, I'm kind of new. The big spin wasn't working out as I was doing it, or my shove it in that case. So I was a bit more prepared for that, but try to be prepared for that concept of that front side rail can dig in real fast and you can whiplash back real fast. So try to be ready to step to the side a bit and take the angle off of going directly backwards. You don't want to fall back and slam your wrist backwards behind you. Even though it's sand, you can absolutely still break your wrist doing that, or just bruising your tailbone real bad, and then you can't skim. If you do it during summer, you lose half your summer to a bruised tailbone. So now we're going to try to commit, and in order to commit, we need to be popping a bit harder. Doesn't necessarily mean that we're getting height on the big spin. It just means that we're going to put our body in the air a bit more, our feet, and we're going to try to get the board off the water a bit longer. You're going to almost add a little bit of speed, not too much, but we just need a little bit more time than what we were doing before. You know, before we're just doing like the shove it and then the spin, but it's on the water, and then we're doing like the spin and then throw a quick little shove it in there. None of those techniques are going to work for a completed big spin. So We're gonna pop a little bit higher, maybe even add a touch of speed, and we're gonna really commit to a full 360-degree turn. And again, if you do mess this up, typically what's gonna happen is the board's gonna go 270, landing in like a side slip out to the ocean, but you, doing the big spin with your body, you might be landing 90 degrees backwards. So be prepared for that kind of fall, that kind of mistake. It's pretty hard to get the big spin around all the way. I'm sure I'm gonna show you right now, because a 5-foot-long 1-inch skimboard, it doesn't appreciate being thrown around like that. So we'll see how hard it is, and we'll probably get a couple good fall clips, who knows. So again, you'll notice as I'm doing these big spins, it's very rare that I'm landing perfectly 360 degrees, and that's going to be the case 95% of the time. And I'm talking about for professionals. You know, flat ground, somebody like Timmy Gambo can probably do it perfectly every time. But once you put them on a wave, or maybe even a contest where there's pressure, you're going to start seeing a lot of pros land it like 270 degrees, 300 degrees, 330 degrees. And you just spin that little last bit out. The momentum's already there. If you are in a contest, does it get scored less technically? Kinda, but it's still a completed big spin. Just a little reaver at the end. But it is good to, when you're learning, to make that commitment to get past 270, because like I'm saying, the worst fall you can have with the big spin is landing perfectly 270, the board in a side slip, digging the rail, and you're flailing back. So when you're learning, like earlier, it's kind of nice to land before 270 so that the board doesn't instantly dig so fast, and then you just kind of spin out and feel that momentum. Now we're committing, a lot like earlier with the shove it. Now we're committing, we want past 270, whatever it is, 300, 330, and eventually work your way up to 360. But we want to get past that 270 because we don't want that really aggressive rail dig that throws your weight back, and then you have to fall backwards, which is challenging for anybody. So let's commit to a couple more big spins and really just try to get it past 270, whatever it is, 300 all the way to 360. We're just going to continue to spin it out. As you're learning the big spin, don't get too concerned about the footing being perfect. Obviously, we'd all love to land with our feet directly in the center, right where we kind of started, so we can continue to skim on. You're gonna have a lot of landings where the feet are off place. There's just way too much going on. The hydrodynamics of popping in water and then trying to land after a spin trick. It's gonna happen. At first, you should be more focused on being ready with your feet wherever they do land, being ready to kind of jump off and maneuver and shift your weight. If you focus too much on getting it perfect, you might actually land perfect with your feet where you want to be, but your weight might be totally wrong. I think you'll just slip out like a banana peel. So let's just focus on getting the spin down, being safe, and then eventually, once you get the spin down over and over again, it's kind of like learning kickflips on a skateboard. Once you get the flip down and you're focusing on like being safe with your ankles, then you move to perfecting the footing of it. Feels good. All right, the tide is dropping out super fast here. Not my favorite kind of conditions to be teaching these tricks in, so let's move on to the 360 shove it. Obviously, you're going to be taking that same idea from the 180 shove it, and it's literally going to take twice the amount of commitment. There's not a lot of technique, and you don't want to get too focused on the safety aspect of hanging your rear foot out. So you're going to end up in a lot of those similar situations where you're going for the 3 shove it, the board spins 270, and you have to determine whether or not your body is in front of the board, and then you use your front foot to tap the board, stop it ideally from going forward, and then you use your rear foot to begin running in front of it to get away from the board. Or it'll be in front of you, and that's kind of dangerous because if you spin the board out in front of you and then tap it to stop it and then go to run away from it, your body momentum is still forward if the board is stopped. So it's very easy to just drag your rear foot right into the rail of your board when you're doing that. So when you're ready for that 360 shove it, know that it's almost purely a commitment thing. There's technique to it. You might want to pop a little bit more, but that's going to come naturally. The scoop and the flick with the rear foot to get the 360 shove it is just so much more aggressive than the 180 shove it. I mean, I was saying you have to commit twice as much, but realistically the effort feels like it's 300% more. There's exponentiality to it. So we didn't get any good falls with the big spin, but I have my fingers crossed we're gonna get some good falling clips as I try to do a 360 shove it with a 5-foot long 1-inch skimboard. It's so hard. Oh my god, I hate this. I told you. After seeing me do all of those tricks first try or whatever so easily, I hope that makes it abundantly clear what kind of commitment a 360 shove it is. I mean, I even kind of got the spin right, but it's just so hard to spin that aggressively, put that much effort in with the body, throwing your legs out, and then commit to the idea of landing perfectly on the board. So you're gonna have a lot of those weird little slip outs. It's just so hard to really put it back on, especially when you know the consequences of missing your feet a little bit and then having the board come at your ankle. I mean, you really don't want that to happen, and for me, I'll probably end up in the hospital, so I'm gonna avoid that at all costs. I hope you guys are appreciating this for scientific purposes. Oh, it's so scary. I can't even focus on landing. Oh, I hate it. Thanks, I hate it. All right, that's as much as I'm doing. Trick tutorials are a bit challenging to explain once you're at that level. I mean, the drop and the wave tutorial is a bit more thoughtful, and I can really give like objective information. With tricks, it's very challenging. People are going to do tricks different a lot. They're going to set up different styles. So once you get to that level, it would be much better to get in-person lessons if possible. If you're in SoCal near Laguna, it's going to be very easy to find somebody giving lessons and just pay for those. But tricks is just a lot of going down to the beach and hacking it all day. And unfortunately, unlike wave riding, that's something where you're probably gonna get hurt a lot, like skateboarding, you know, just like me falling on that 3 shove. I mean, if you have deeper water, it's nice and you can kind of just fall into it, but right now it's so low tide that basically felt like falling on the sidewalk, like, you know, just scraping your knee and whatnot. So take it slowly, try to avoid getting injured. Do the shove it and the spin and take everything real slowly, and then once you get to a level where you're doing shove it's easily with like a little pop into them, and then you're sort of getting that big spin around, because remember, a big spin technically, if you do it perfectly, is a 360 shove it in its own right with you spinning on it. So it should be harder, but the funny thing is that the 3 shove it is way harder because you have to actually counteract the spin that you put in your legs to bring your body back and on top of the board. Whereas the big spin, you can do a lot of cheater techniques. You're already spinning, you go with the momentum of the board. So I'm sorry that tutorial couldn't have been better. I hope it was at least worth me falling on a 5-foot long 1-inch skimboard. But let me know what the next tutorial should be. I think if we get some waves, I might do like more of a wave riding. We already did the drop, we did the turn, And now we did the tricks, which was not so helpful. I mean, everybody's gonna struggle with tricks. Everybody's gonna fall a bit. It's really just putting in the time. So maybe we'll do wave riding next. Of course, we're gonna need waves to do it, so I'm probably gonna have to do it somewhere outside of LA. Maybe we'll have a guest appearance from somebody to help us out. All right, thanks for suffering through this horrible video. Hopefully the next one will be better.